Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are live. It's Thursday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. I'm your Eastern. I'm your host, Hillary. And as you can see, we're doing something a little different tonight with a special episode of Aftermath. Tonight, we thought it would be fun to discuss the process of creating narrative and how to do that within our Discord, but also maybe some suggestions and advice on how to do that at your table. Little bit of a combination of Aftermath and the old school behind the screen. So get ready for a mildly spoilerific look behind the screen of RealmSmith's Discord server. I'm your host, Hillary Z. A few announcements before we get started. Of course, we want to start with a huge thanks to our sponsor, Forged Gaming. They make everything from dice towers and dice trays to binder-ready card holders for spell or monster cards, and of course, a huge selection of clacky math rocks that we all know and love and have a mild obsession with. So if you check out their website and do an order, you can get 20% off your order by typing in RealmSmith20, all one word, at checkout. Join us Monday nights for our main title show, Into the Mist, on YouTube at 7 p.m. Eastern. We are now in our 4th season and heating right up. Everything is really starting to come to a head. Lots of interesting things happening. If you're interested in interacting with the Dawnbringers and playing an active role in their story, consider joining our Patreon, which will give you access to the role-playing portion of our Discord server. It's an amazing community. There's people role-playing almost 24 hours a day, and it's a lot of fun. So you should come check that out. So that's really all the announcements we have tonight. So as usual, if you are watching live and if you have any questions for myself or Julian or Johnny, go ahead and put it into the chat prefaced by the word question in all caps, and the moderators will put that into a chat where I can easily find all of them. So joining us this evening, we have Julian Kanko and John Kirk. How you guys doing tonight?
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing fantastic.
Good. So glad you guys could join me this evening. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having us, Hillary.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Good to be here on the other side of the screen for once.
I don't quite have the mohawk that Jason does, but I'll try to make up for it down here.
The beard definitely makes up for it. How you feeling, Johnny? You nervous to be on this side of the camera?
Yeah, it's a little bit strange. And the last time I was here was when I got ambushed and ended up role-playing as Nora on the channel. It's been a while since I've been back since then. So yeah, it's good to be here, but it's a little strange.
Been a hot minute.
That was really, really fun. Alrighty. Well, so tonight, like I said, we thought it would be fun to give you a little bit of a view into our creative process and how we cultivate content for all of our wonderful Discord players. Some of this will be specifically relevant to our Discord server, but a lot of it will also be something that you can take and apply to your home game. I know that being a DM can be very overwhelming and daunting for a lot of people. There's a lot of people feel like there's this big barrier to entry because it feels like you have to know the entire Dungeon Master's Guide, and you have to know how every monster works and know every rule, but that's really not how it is. And really, if you ask anybody who's been DMing for even, a few decades, they don't even know all the rules. So it's totally okay. But we have noticed that there's been a lot of questions about where do you actually start in planning a session? How do you put together something that will be engaging for your players? So hopefully we can address some of those questions tonight. I would like to start with a little bit of background on who we are and our experience with the game Dungeons and Dragons. So go ahead, Julian. How did you get started? Who are you? What does D&D mean to you?
Gosh. I started playing D&D when I started dabbling around with Dungeons and Dragons when I was maybe in late high school, early university. I've been, I would say, like seriously playing and DMing for close to a decade now, maybe 8 or 9 years, somewhere in there. Started off just with a home game with some online friends, and then eventually transitioning. I actually DM'd for a game shop in my hometown. That's kind of where I got the bulk of my DMing experience, because I was there Tuesdays and Thursdays every week, running 2 different sessions. And then, just kind of continued it with home games with some friends, and then eventually when I moved out here towards the Toronto area, found RealmSmith and just kind of continued that way, not necessarily DMing all the time, but definitely supporting with the narrative and creative process that we put out here at RealmSmith with Jason and you guys now. And yeah, that's kind of where I started out.
Nice goblet, Johnny.
Yeah, that'd be on theme for the evening. Sadly, it's not full of blood, but it's, yeah.
Oh,
I went with the Ribena instead.
So how did you get into D&D? Where are you at in your D&D journey?
Oh, grief. This is actually now where it goes and exposing my age a little bit. So I got into it just around about kind of sort of what we in the UK would class as junior school. So I've probably been playing on and off for almost 30 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I started out with just a single friend. We actually found that he had the old first edition red box. I somehow at times I wish I'd actually taken it off him, because I think he got rid of it. But yeah, early doors, graph paper, 2 people, some dice, and just making characters up on the fly. Great fun. But yeah, just played on and off through years. It's been involved with a local gaming club, and this is obviously where it's really come through. I've had some great DMs over the years, so it's picked up sort of stuff they've done. And there's people in the channel that I'm very much about the role play, not just the role play. So
Yes.
It's actually sort of having that fun with it, and had an interesting discussion with some of the guys tonight actually about sort of the meanings of the rules and how they work, and what it actually means to be in the game with it.
Yeah.
Funny you say that. I still, we're just starting to kind of get back into the routine of it now, because things are opening up here in Ontario, as far as COVID goes. But every Thursday night, this tonight being an exception, I actually play with my dad and a bunch of his friends in a pretty heavily modified version of AD&D, so like 2nd edition. But like they use an amalgamation of like 1st edition rules and 2nd edition rules, and then a bunch of rules that they've kind of adapted over the last 40 years.
Nice.
So yeah, I have an appreciation for both the old and the new D&D.
So did you get your dad into D&D, or was it the other way around?
We actually kind of, because my dad and I had a falling out, family stuff for a while there. But when we eventually reconnected, it just kind of turned out that I got into D&D on my own, and he was already into D&D. So yeah, it's funny the way that works out. Genetics and things like that influences as you grow up. It's funny the way those things work out. So
That's really cool.
yeah. Well, and then what about you?
And-
How did you get into D&D?
I was introduced to D&D probably about 4 years ago from a coworker. We worked together at Trader Joe's, and he came up to me and was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting a game. My old home game fell apart. Would you like to join?" I said, "Absolutely, let's do this." And I was immediately hooked. Yes, Julia?
For the Canadian and maybe the Brit in the group, what's a Trader Joe's?
Oh, it's an unnecessarily fancy grocery store.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Specializing in snacks.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So he asked if we wanted to play. I started playing, and immediately was hooked. It's because I'm a theater kid, so there's so many skills that you learn in theater that are applicable to Dungeons and Dragons. But I want to make this really clear: you do not need a theater background to be amazing at Dungeons and Dragons. You really, really don't.
Nope.
There's a lot of things that you do learn there that are helpful, but there's also a lot of skills in regular life that you learn that are super helpful for D&D.
Yeah. Yeah. You also don't have to be a voice actor. Don't believe in that Critical Role effect or that Matt Mercer effect, right? Like, you do not need to be a voice actor. You don't need to be a professional to play Dungeons and Dragons. 99% of all other D&D games that exist in this world are like just the regular schmoes, like you or me or anybody else in the chat.
Yes.
Don't worry about it.
Nobody should ever aspire to be another dungeon master. They should aspire to be the best dungeon master they can be, while taking inspiration and learning from each dungeon master. Because I've watched you guys, like I've watched you, Julian DM. I've watched Jason. Obviously, I've seen Shad and just so many people Dungeon Master, including several streams that I've watched online, and they're all so incredibly different. And I've gained knowledge and techniques that I like to use from each one of them, but I'm never going to be them.
Yep.
And that's okay.
And nor should you be.
No, exactly. Yeah. Nobody should try to be just like Matt Mercer. He wouldn't even want that.
No.
I mean, he's famous for actually encouraging people not to be like him, isn't he? This is it.
Exactly.
Everybody's going to be different.
Yeah.
Exactly.
As long as you're having fun, that's all that matters.
Yes. We've got a comment. Sorry, go ahead.
No, as I say, if you want to try the accent, give it a try. I mean, it's. I know in my video that came up on the stream the other night, I went through 3 accents, and some of them take some working at, and some of them come naturally. So again, it's just have a crack at it.
Oh, that actually leads well into a question that I had, because you did your voice for Blood Muzzle. And it's so different from your other characters, but I wanted you to kind of talk a little bit about your process of creating these really unique characters, because if you guys don't know, Johnny was the mind behind creating Blood Muzzle.
That's his baby. That's his brainchild.
It really is his baby, and he's such a cool character that has brought so much life and like terror and frustration in the best way possible to our little camp. Also in Tides, he was the mind behind Captain Barabbas.
Yep. Yeah, the nice big sharky dude.
Yes.
Yeah, he may be back again.
Another very intimidating, really interesting character. So for the new DMs out there, what is your process of creating either a villain or an ally, or somewhere in between, as sometimes NPCs are, that is themed and rooted within the world, but also like fleshed out as an interesting character?
It's probably weird. I actually probably come at it from the opposite end. Is some people might go through the thought process of a character and what they're going to be and their stats and how powerful they are and what class they are. I tend to come from the reverse. In fact, I'll try and find a piece of artwork. I'll find a picture that kind of fits with an idea I've got that matches the setting, and it kind of works from there. If you look at the picture of it, you see them, you take it, okay, what would their mind work like? And then you start fleshing out into actually the more robust character. So with the likes of in Tides, that was very much I saw a piece of artwork online. It was then, okay, so half shark, half man, would that work as a race? And actually, yes, there was the abominations. It's like, great, okay, so now we can make it work mechanically. Then you can start fleshing the rest of the details out with it. Especially with Blood Muzzle, that was a piece of artwork. It's a wolf. It was I think actually we were having a bit of a chat amongst the crew, and we came up with like a bit of play on words and blood and muzzle. Oh, actually, we can put the two together. And then that kind of spiraled with the artwork, and then say, okay, what do we base it on? Now, hands up, I mean, some people may have figured out that there's a bit of real character behind him, especially the slower voice and the always very tactically planning stuff and working towards it. Yeah, some might say he's very arrogant, but actually he just knows exactly what he's doing.
The fine line between arrogance and confidence, and he skirts it.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure the players are waiting for him to actually step over the line and go the wrong way. That time may come.
No,
that's really cool.
He's a fun character too, because he's a villain where you wouldn't expect to find a big villain. That's my favorite part about Blood Muzzle, and that in this big land of Barovia with all these already established big bads, you took the time to go, you know what? No, we're gonna make a big, mean, awful, highly sentient variation of, I don't know if it's a variation of a winter wolf or a variation of a guardian wolf or somewhere in between, but it's just that he's so unique for the setting. That's my favorite part. It's an unexpected villain.
And the great thing is that again, it's again as a DM, I think it's one of those things you've got to be careful about not breaking the rules too much, because some people obviously will feel it breaks the immersion of actually that wouldn't be able to do X, Y, and Z. But the nice thing with Blood Muzzle is the fact that they can talk, they have different languages. Again, you keep it grounded in the fact that you can use some of those rules. So, I mean, the reactions from the chat when we first had him actually come up onto the rock, appear, and then started talking, and people were like, oh. But then because he had the different languages, we did actually place him where he could actually speak common, because I think it's normally giant and elvish they can speak. So to open it up a little bit, we did just bend it slightly, the fact that he had other languages. So I think it is one of those things of actually not being afraid to bend the rules and the guidelines a little bit to suit yourself. If it makes it work for the narrative, it's just not too out of character, and it doesn't break people's immersion, is don't be afraid to have a play around with it. It's much like the rules, that they are very much guidelines. And if you take something, you actually, you know what, this little thing would be making him really cool, the fact that he can talk in common, and it's almost like it's beneath him actually having to lower himself to the language to be understood, but he gets his message across. It kind of works overall.
Yeah, and that's I think you hit the nail on the head with that, is that the rules are really guidelines. Don't get me wrong, there are some hard and fast rules to keep the game structured and to make things balanced and fair, but you know, to say that a creature can speak a language or that it has a certain ability, like, it's all there for a reason, to get you started, to give you a baseline to work with. But some of the best narratives, like, you know, look at all the best streams out there, even what Jason does on Monday nights. Things are bent, things are broken, things are improv'd, and things are homebrewed, and that's the whole beauty of D&D, is that it, especially 5th edition, they built it so simple so that you can make it what you want it to be. And that's, I mean, for any aspiring DM out there, or anybody running in their own home game, and you know, you're trying to figure out how to take it to the next level, don't be afraid to kind of break out of that box of, this is what the DMG says, so this is what I have to do, or this is what my player book says, so this is what I have to. No, you don't. Talk to your team, talk to your dungeon master, talk to your table. If you want to homebrew something, go homebrew it, right? If you want to do something different, if you want to bend a rule a little bit, insert a brand new rule. There's so much content out there that you can incorporate into your own game to make it your own. I would highly encourage doing that for your own personal happiness and joy in your home game with your friends and your family and whoever else it is.
Yeah, I really. Go ahead, Johnny.
No, I was going to say, Jill's just really hit the nail on the head there. It's if you invest in the character yourself and you have that freedom of actually doing a bit more with it, it comes through in that character, and the fact that you're enjoying playing that bad guy or portraying what it does to people, is it will come across so much better. So as long as you're enjoying it as the DM as well, it will actually feed through to everybody else's enjoyment.
Yeah, and I think I saw a question that I'm
really
just going to kind
of
address. Is I saw a question there about like how to play the bad guys, or how to play your monsters better as a DM. Take the time to get in their mindset, right? Even if it's just a simple monster that you're pulling from the monster manual for a random encounter, the more you can put your head in that mindset and be that character, the better it's going to be. Don't just be the DM running the monsters. Be that Knoll, right? What do they want? What's their motivation? Why are they so angry? Why do they want to kill you? And get into that mindset. It's amazing what you can do when you take yourself out of that DM's chair and pretend to actually be the things you're running. Just like a player, right? That the whole experience of a player is to get out of reality, right? Get out of Julian, get out of John, get out of Hillary, and now I'm going to be Barbanegra, I'm going to be Elder Wattleby, I'm going to be Piotr, whoever it's going to be. The DM's supposed to be doing that too. So if you can take yourself out of the DM's chair, put yourself in the mind of that Knoll or that wizard or whoever it's going to be, that will elevate. I guarantee you, it will elevate your gameplay for sure.
Yeah. And if you're not sure where to start on that, check out the lore behind the creatures. A lot of times finding out what their origin is, how they're created, how they interact with the environment can really play up and give you incredible inspiration that you never would have thought of. Like a lot of times when we're writing our modules, we have a rough idea of where we're starting, but we really flesh out the details of how it'll all work out after we read the lore behind the creatures. Because it'll let you know how they would respond to a certain thing, what kind of environment they would be in, and how they would be reacting, and how they'd be reacting to the environment and the environment reacting to them. And then also reading through those extra abilities they have besides just their attacks. Like a dryad, for example, can hop between trees. And so that to me shows that she would have, or they would have, more of a sneaky kind of try to get in and then get out and get some distance by using a tree stride or something like that. So it really, really helps develop strategy by like Julian said, really knowing the creature. And to do that, use the lore that Dungeons and Dragons has already provided, because they have spent years building this stuff up. And there's some really good stuff, especially with some of the more recent monsters. Like everything in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft has incredible lore behind it. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's fantastic. There's a lot of great stuff from Van Richten's.
Yeah. So Matt Machinsky, I hope that answers your question. Go ahead, Johnny.
I'd say it's one of those things, actually. I mean, it's quite exciting because it hasn't quite landed just yet, but there is a new module on the way that should be landing shortly. And actually what you were saying there, Hillary, is a really good point. A lot of the stuff we built into it is we've based it on the lore, so we've taken some ideas. I'm not going to give any spoilers away, maybe a little one, but there's a certain creature that we've taken, and it's known for holding court. And we've taken that, and it's actually we actually based the whole encounter around that, and we've created a twisted version of it. You'll know it when you see it, but again, it's that not having the fear of actually adapting, taking the basics there and going, okay, so that's kind of what it does. Okay, so we're in this setting with these things happening around it. Okay, well, how can we adapt it so it fits what we want to do, but it still keeps that kind of spirit of what was intended? And yeah, I think the new module, there's probably 2 or 3 things where we've actually really played with the new Van Richten's monsters. We've taken the ideas there and we've kind of pulled it together as a cohesive whole for the module, but it's all still like you can understand where it's coming from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'd like to read a couple comments from the audience. Roman Wolf has a comment for Julian. It shows you do, Julian. I think your style reminds me of old school gaming, which I grew up on. 5 stars, would recommend you as a DM. That's really nice, Roman Wolf.
Thank you.
Especially if you want people to die.
Yeah, Julian does not pull punches. Ain't no dice fudging there.
Yeah.
But you know what? That is what makes the game good. If we just had infinite respawns, this game wouldn't be interesting. There has to be consequence.
I've always been of the mindset that if you don't fear for your character's life in an encounter, then the encounter wasn't good.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that every encounter needs to be that way. I will from time to time throw an easier encounter, but it's a Dark Souls style of DMing is what I like to call it. Where the enemies are swift and brutal.
Yep. And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Now, for you, Johnny, we've got a comment from Mr. Carrot. He says, for some reason, hearing you talk about Blood Muzzle's motivations and mindset makes me think of him like a mob boss running all the wolf packs in Barovia.
That's not a million miles away from it. Yeah, it's he's very cold and calculating, quite literally for a winter wolf. But yeah, he watches, he learns. And he will sit at the back. He's not one for direct action.
He doesn't have the Don Corleone voice, though. He's got a much more different tone to him than Don Corleone.
Yeah, I'm not stuffing cotton wool into my mouth to try and do the voice for that one. It's you want to come and be my wolves, eh? You want to fight for me?
Surprisingly good.
You should be the cotton wool in. But yeah, the Blood Muzzle, I mean, the voice and the character is based from Star Wars. I'll let that much away because it's again that very cool, calculated
greatest characters from Star Wars.
Yeah, it's something that we're glad to see back in the animated stuff as well. But yeah, again, we sometimes talk about not using real world stuff and trying to keep it to the fantasy side, but again, it doesn't stop you actually using some influence from the real world stuff. So again, Blood Muzzle is 100% ours. He is acting as we want him to for the channels and what we want him to do narratively. But some of his motivations and how he goes about that has been influenced by outside things. We're just not out and out straight up calling it that or doing it all just to copy it. It's taking elements of it and building it into things like his voice, his standing back, and his very much of his look on tactics and understanding and teasing the Vistani.
Yeah, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. There's so much content out there. There's so much inspiration out there.
And never feel bad about taking inspiration from a character that you love, because frankly, within art, there's nothing that is completely original. Everybody who's created something that is artistic has taken inspiration from things they see in their lives that inspire them, that make them think differently, that make them see the world differently, or even see themselves differently. So never feel bad about saying, oh, I really like this character in the show. How do I adapt it? Just don't make it like an exact reproduction, because that's not fun. Tailor it to your setting, tailor it to your players, tailor it to what you think is interesting, or combine two different characters. Nothing is more fun than a character with contrast, like contrasting internal versus external, or just some sort of fight within them makes them so interesting. So we've talked a lot about like how to plan, but Julian, one thing you are phenomenal at as a DM is improv.
Yeah,
I would love it if you could talk about this a little bit, because I'm still a fairly new DM as well, and I am so inspired by Julian's ability to improv things that feel like they are really a part of it and add to it, as opposed to just like, oh, that's a random thing that you've brought in. It really adds to the story and immersion. How do you do that? What do you pull from? Please share your knowledge with me.
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer, because it's not something that I even like have, like, I don't think about it, sort of thing, right? It's improv. That the whole point of improv is that you're not thinking about it, that you're just kind of reacting on the fly. I would say it kind of just started from my lack of preparation. I was never, I got good grades in school, but I was that kid who like got good grades all through like grade school and high school, and then university hit. We actually had to have study habits in place, and then just like shit the bed. So I have a pretty good memory, so I think it's a lot of pulling and relying on that, of just having a lot of just junk, like useless stuff that's just shoved in the back of my head somewhere. And then when I improv, it's just like, oh yeah, no, I'm going to pull on this, that, and the other, because, you read that or watched that clip 7 years ago at 3 a.m. And for some reason you remember that, but you can't remember phone numbers. So I would say it's a lot of that. It's pulling on that useless stuff that's just stuck in the back of my head. I would say, I have, like I said, it's having a good memory and being able to rely on that, but then also just really playing off of my table, and playing off of my characters there. Some of my most favorite moments that I've ever had the pleasure of being the game master, the dungeon master for, are the moments that I had no idea they were coming. I had zero preparation for it, because the plot, the story, the narrative, the dialogue went completely the other direction. And it was just me and my players just feeding off of each other, bouncing ideas off each other through narrative, right? And just really letting it evolve naturally. I wholeheartly and 100% believe in not having things railroaded, and not having everything planned out to a T. I definitely come into things with the idea of, this is the general direction I want things to move in. Whether it goes in that direction now, or if it goes in this other direction that I had prepared, whatever that is, but I do not railroad it, and I do not have things like nailed down to the specific dialogue and plot and narrative and event that's going to have. No, that's not the way it's going to go, because you can do that all you want, and then your players are going to say, well, yeah, I'm going to spend the whole day shopping though. Great. Well, did you prepare all the shop dialogue with all the different shopkeepers that were going to be the interact? Like, you can't. Then you can't railroad it. If you want to have a natural and fun and evolving narrative with your table, you have to let it go. You have to let the story unfold itself, and you're just there to keep it going. Really, at the end of the day, pull on your past experiences, pull from books or games or novels or movies or TV, whatever it is. Pull from anything you've got, tweak it, adapt it, throw it at them, and let it evolve very, very naturally. I think the more you can, like I said, step back, let it go, let it breathe, the better off you're going to be in the long run. And that's all to say, if you can do that. I mean, that's just me. That's my own process. I don't know if that works for everybody. That's just, like I said, that's just me.
It works so well. I mean, one of my greatest memories that I'll always carry with me from the early days of RealmSmith, when we first set out in Tides, is, I'm sure it's probably one of like the first kind of like on-screen missions we did, where Jules, you were running it. We went out. I mean, we were level 1 or 2 characters. I mean, this was the really early days of RealmSmith. and one of the characters died, and it was a proper full death. In fact, the creature
that was Steve's wife.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
That killed Scoob's wife.
Yeah,
That's why she hasn't been back.
Yeah, we're not just talking, death saves, or, well, you failed your 2 death saves. No, we're talking, was it a Spectre? And basically just went, you're dead. Like, dead.
Yeah.
And again, you talk about the narrative and letting it roll. My character at the time was following the path of the Raven Queen, and obviously it was a complete left sort of turn on the quest of the, okay, I think it was even Ketamatari's priest was trying to heal her up, and it's like, it's not working. And we ran with the whole resurrection thread of I prayed to the Raven Queen as a fighter. You made some high DC rolls for us, and we made it. But the thing is that one instant there of running with it and adapting then spun off to my character's future of what he did and what he's sort of committed to. Marie's character then went on to actually change religion because obviously she lost faith in her own. So the narrative stuff you do there, yes, it's brilliant at that moment in time, but especially with something like the Discord, it spirals off to so many other stories now. And again, I'm sure that there's people on the Discord now that will have many a tale that, due to one thing happening in one place, started the ball rolling on something else, and then something else, and then something else, and led them to character decisions to where they are now. Especially, Mr. Carrot just mentioned that, we had some great RP interactions after that, because the back streets of Dark Toe, 2 characters getting together and talking about their woes. Again, it was some great RP moments.
But I mean, to add to that is like I said, that wasn't like my creative. I didn't come up with that. That wasn't my idea. That I pulled, and full admit, like I pulled that right from Matt Mercer, right? Like that's the way that Matt does Resurrection. And back in campaign 1, when spoiler alert, if you haven't watched campaign 1 of Critical Role, you might want to tune out for the next 30 seconds. But the Raven Queen had a very heavy role with Vax'ildan, right? And there were many moments where that exact scene that I described, where it's just this drop my pen, where Vax'ildan is just standing in her hand, and there's just that big white porcelain face that's just ominous and towering in front of him. That happens so many times. So that's what I'm saying about like you don't have to be coming up with 100% original content all the time. No one would be expected to do that. It takes, I think, a very, very creative and talented mind, to be the likes of like the J.K. Rowlings and the Tolkiens of the world that are creating these whole universes, from their minds. Like that's not everybody's going to be that. Not everybody's expected to be that, and not every dungeon master, at the very least, not every dungeon master is expected to be that. Pull from what you know, Absolutely. Pull from what you've seen and experienced, and I guarantee you it's going to turn into a good time, because it will at least be like 2% original, because it's your spin on that moment, and your spin on that concept or idea or narrative or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think the big thing as well is not having that fear of rather than sort of the deer in the headlights moment of that wasn't meant to happen, grief. It's so some ideas have come up with, we'll try and roll with it. Again, it's that bending of the rules, it's that twisting the narrative that, a fighter should not be able to resurrect another character. But if done in the right way, with the right narrative, with the right spirit of the event, don't be afraid to try those ideas out, because if it keeps the game moving, keeps the momentum and the cadence going, have some fun with it, because ultimately the players will as well. And that's what we're there for, really, is to make that enjoyment come out of it.
Yeah, but that's why I think I'm terrible, quite honestly, at doing these module things, because it's not my style. Like I don't write things, and I don't like beat for beat plan out a module. That's not how I do. So when I was sitting there writing that first module, I think it was Blighted, which one? No, the Blood of the Vine one.
Lifeblood.
That was one of the hardest things I ever had to do, because I had to like write out every single thought I had, and then my mind is also like, 30 seconds later I come up with a better idea, so then I have to go back and like double back on what I already did. It sucked. I am so glad that you two decided that you wanted to start doing modules, because it made my life so much better. I could just be that guy that's like, ooh, I had this idea. Ooh, I got this idea. Oh, and you can go back and do this. And it just, it works better.
That's why you're so great. When Johnny and I are stuck on something, we can call on you, and then suddenly you throw something totally new in there that we never would have expected. And I know that for a lot of DMs, they are planning by themselves and you can't talk to your players about what you're planning. So it really helps to have something like the Discord server where there's other people who are DMing that you can bounce ideas off of. Because sometimes when I'm trying to just write on my own, I get totally lost. So having other DM friends is a huge benefit.
Yep, collaboration is key.
Yep.
Doesn't matter what industry you're in. Collaboration is key.
Yeah,
Yes.
and the communication. I mean, especially with the Discord. I mean, obviously we are trying to. It's not just your 5-man sort of round the table kind of setup, which I mean we keep on coming back to. Is that if it was round the table, if it was just 5 people, you've got kind of more of a finite knowledge of what you're working with, who you're trying to deliver stuff for. We've got, 60, 70 players on the Discord we're trying to deliver narrative for. And sometimes it really is a case of them to get our heads together because we need that overarching, like, where are we trying to get to? And we are building the story up to that point. And I think it's useful and it's almost sort of, it's just nice that we have that team to rely on because it is quite hard if you're trying to cover all that thought process right to the end. Having those people to bounce off and come up with ideas, put stuff forwards, and actually might not be quite right, or actually one idea spins off another 3 ideas, and then you come up with a greater whole. And I think it's worthwhile just for the players. Obviously, sometimes when you're the player at that very narrow point and you see stuff happening in the narrative, it's very easy to question it and why is this happening, or well, that doesn't seem right. It's reassuring you guys that actually behind the scenes we're talking to each other and we have this much bigger picture behind the scenes that we're working to. So what you might see at this little point here, it does build something else because we're looking at that big narrative. And talking to Hillary, talking to Jules, talking to Jay as the overall DM of actually sort of what we're aiming for. There's so much going on behind the scenes. It's brilliant.
Yeah, that's the thing, is there's always so much more going on behind the scenes with your DM than you think. If something comes up and you're like, this doesn't make sense, I don't understand, it's probably that part in the video game where you're doing circles and you cannot figure out what's wrong, and you just have to trust that you're missing a part of the picture and trust your DM. And that leads me into a question from some guy named Joel Auger who's in the chat.
We don't take questions from Frenchmen.
Who let him in?
We don't like the Quebecois.
He has a question for me, which is, how did you build up the courage to become a DM? And a huge part of that is I have a party that I have a lot of trust in. My first time DMing was for my birthday. I came up with this unnecessarily complicated setting and story, but it was so much fun to run because I had a table of people that I know it's okay to mess up around, and it's okay to not have all the answers. And trust is such a huge part of this game. And if you're afraid of DMing, get yourself a group of people that you know are going to be all right, and make mistakes. Forget to use abilities. Forget to use regenerate for your zombies, which I do every single time I play zombies. It's okay. It's really okay to mess up. I think one of the biggest barriers to entry with people DMing is the fear of messing up and not being able to keep all of the plates in the air. And it's important to know that just like any other stage production or performance, even the most polished production, they've forgotten to do things. They have messed up things. They've made mistakes, but they don't show it, and they just keep going. And so the people watching don't ever even notice. And that's okay.
It's that musicians thing, right? If you just play past the note you missed, no one's going to know. You're your worst critic, right? Yeah.
And again, look at so many movies recently where it comes out now, where they're obviously with all the social media and stuff on, they'll talk about a film and, oh, and did you know one of the most famous lines of that film was totally ad-libbed? It wasn't in the script. It was just spur of the moment. I mean, the daft stuff like Rob Downey Jr. having food hidden around the set. So when he pulls food out and starts offering it to people, it's because he hid it on set because he was hungry. It's that ad-libbing. It's just rolling with it. If you get the moments and you come out with a funny line, or some kind of creature happens to just perk stuff up and you're like, well, actually, we could use that. Just roll with it. Don't have to worry about it. If it works at the time and keeps the cadence, keep it going.
Exactly. And when a player throws a question at you that totally throws you for a loop, just go with the old improv motto of go with yes and. Even if it doesn't work with the rules, find a way to make it work. Unless it's totally outlandish, like a dwarf being like, can I pick up a mountain? Obviously, that's not going to happen. And yes, that has actually happened to the game, which is why I use that example. But just yes and it. Say, how do we make this work? And even if you can't make the whole thing work, find a little portion of it that you can work into it. Because it's collaborative storytelling. Like, the DM doesn't need to feel the pressure to create a story. That's something that you're doing together. I think the most important thing, and I still am learning this, is you don't need to write a story. Just write an interesting setting that you would enjoy doing an adventure in, and then write some interesting characters, and then see what happens. Mm-hmm. I think as long as you know the tone that you want to keep and the direction you want your story to go in, you can really improv a lot of the rest of it.
Yeah.
And
that also goes back to, I think, why I struggle with the module writing, because I don't want to railroad it. I don't want to give this very clear cut, this is the logical progression of things that are going to happen. And I don't know if anybody noticed it in that module, but I tried to leave things kind of open-ended. I tried to leave a lot of room for, of course my camera did that, why wouldn't it do that? Hello.
Hey, you know what? It is not a live stream without some sort of technical difficulties.
Yeah, it just decides sometimes that it's not gonna be a thing, which is odd. But like, even in that module that I did, I tried to leave it so that there was a clear sort of beginning, middle, and end, and there was a clear like option to a conclusion. But I left a lot of it open. I left a lot of how the dialogue could go, how the progression of the story could go very, very open, because I don't want to railroad it. I want those natural moments to be able to have that room to breathe, for that DM to be able to have that space where the players can role play. You leave the time for travel and conversation, and let that natural evolution of that table with that player and that DM come to life. And like I said, it's what I've struggled with in terms of like trying to map out and write down a story. But again, that's why I'm very glad I have you guys.
And that's a big difference.
You complete me.
Aww. That's so cute. That's the big difference between prepping for a module and prepping for a long form campaign.
Yeah.
Because with a long form campaign, you have a lot more room to let them go check out the random chair that they're for some reason obsessed with, and you can let them do that for an entire session if they need to. But with a module, it is a little bit more railroady, I guess. I don't really know another word for it, but there is a little bit more of a like, this happens and then this
structure.
Happens and this,
it's a lot more
then
structure.
This happens. Exactly.
Yeah.
But a really fun way of still allowing player initiative into that is by inserting skill challenges, where you ask them to look at their character sheet and they can use a spell or an ability or just a plain old fashioned skill check, which is just as good, and let them really describe what it looks like when they do that. Because giving people the opportunity to define what it looks like when they use their magic, or what sort of weird kickflip they do if they're a monk or something like that, adds a lot of agency and ownership to the moment, and gets people really, really immersed and gets them more emotionally invested in it, I think. One thing I really love is when some DMs will hand out an item or something like that and say, what does it look like? Or I created the silly homebrew wild magic item that would create the smell of everybody's favorite dessert, and going around the table and letting each person describe what their character is smelling. Even though it seems kind of small and maybe insignificant, engaging more senses and engaging a player to let them add to the story in an even more direct way really, like I said, just adds immersion and emotional investment, which is really the most important thing in D&D.
On a totally unrelated note, I don't know what's going on in the chat, but they're talking about food and avocado toast.
Oh no.
And
oh
gravy.
no.
I don't think mentioned biscuits and gravy yet. But no, I mean, you raised a really good point there, Hillary, as well, actually, is when we did the Esther Hill module, again, there was a beginning, a middle, and an end. We had a structure to it. We had an end goal we were trying to move people towards. There was a reason they were going there. So it was how you introduce it, how you give them some various options in the middle, but still end up at where we need them to get to. But you put in that the mists encounter. Now, again, people could look at the mists in the distance. They could completely ignore it if they wanted to. Or they could go over and look into it. And again, a little bit of spoiler, depending what actually happened at the mists, various people would see things. And it was down to you getting the opportunity of actually great roleplay moments of what is it you see in the mists. Opens it up to the players, allows them to do what they want to do. But it's also important that, I mean, Dungeons & Dragons inherently is very combat focused. It's all about having the fights, moving through, having your short rests, getting your skills back and stuff. But I think there are times where remembering it is also a role-playing game, and not every encounter has to be deadly. Not every encounter even has to be a fight. It can be those skill challenges. You're trying to find some information out. It can just be a really creepy atmospheric moment, which from some of the people involved, one of the things we put out into the chat tonight, there is something that happens where literally, yes, it leads to a fight, but ultimately before that, it's just narrative, it's scene setting. It's building that story of the Discord as a whole, and builds up that sort of, as we keep on talking about, that theatre of the mind for the players. And I think that's very key, is when you try and do stuff, is try and be descriptive. And especially with the likes of Ravenloft, with Van Richten's, there's so much more opportunity to do that now. You can be a lot creepier, a lot darker, or in Julian's case, devious.
Murderous.
Murderous as well.
Paint me in such a negative light. So negative.
But
I haven't
positively.
killed any players in like
This
months.
season.
Months. It's been months that I've actually killed a player.
Beware, people.
Yeah, I was going to say, they set up a line there. It's a case of access. Next time you're in a mission with Jules, be careful.
Yeah. But
So I see another question from Joel in here, and I know we're not supposed to be taking questions from him, but it's actually a good question. What happens in your head as a DM when players are doing the wrong thing?
So
The thing is, how do you pick a wrong thing?
yeah, it depends on the scenario. I mean, there's the wrong thing, like rules-wise, like
Yeah.
casting 4 spells in a turn, right? Like that. There's rule breaking, and then there's like, and I think he's maybe getting at the more like the narratively like wrong thing. And
Like you want them to go to A, but they're suddenly obsessed with Z.
Yeah.
And you're like, why are you going that direction?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's a case by case basis. In a home game, in the way that I DM, it's almost impossible to make a wrong decision, because it's just making a decision, right? It's what your character is going to do in this world based off of how you decide to roleplay them. And again, that's why I said I'd like to leave things very open and very non-structured and non-railroaded, because then there's no wrong decision. There's no wrong way to go. There's no wrong way to do something. And it allows me to then roleplay off of them, to take what they've done and make maybe not necessarily the best of the situation, because maybe the best of making the best of that scenario might be actually punishing them for it. And letting it evolve that way, right? Case in point, I ran a home game where session 1, it was very, very simple. Like, here's the mission from so and so. There's other interested parties involved. It's kind of a race to who gets there first, sort of thing. And the whole session was them just doing everything wrong. Like, they went to like the most powerful people in the city to try and pay to get teleported there when they don't have any money, and then they tried to break into the airship tower. Like, and it was all the wrong things to do. Every single possible wrong thing they did, but we made a 4-hour session out of it, because it was role playing with the wizards at the tower. It was role playing and trying to lie your way into the airship tower. It was getting up to the airship tower and realizing, oh crap, we don't know what we're doing here. We should leave, right? And letting that all breathe. It doesn't have to go exactly the way it's meant to go, because that's not how life goes. Name a single moment in your entire life where everything went according to plan. Like, that's just not life. So
Nope.
it shouldn't be your D&D character's life. So that's a very long-winded way of saying there's no wrong way to do D&D, narratively speaking.
But how often did they lead to the best stories, though? Those ad-lib moments, those off-center ones of the... I mean, it's a bit of an inside baseball one, but the part where Bob and Nager actually interacted with the cast, and they were actually sort of, oh, where do we go next? What do we do? There was a plan. There was also some other bits that were mentioned, and of course, the cast ran with the idea that wasn't the main plan. But Jay, he just took it, he ran with it. He took them there as they wanted to go see Madame Eva. He ran with it and still got them back on track again. But some of the stuff that happened in the interim, hilarious, great watching. And it's that not being afraid to just run with it. As Joel says, it's don't be afraid to just bend it. And if somebody goes off left and wants to do something, let them do it.
Yeah. That's why really the biggest piece of advice that I can take and a lot of new DMs can take is really don't over-prepare. Because like I said, if you just know your tone and know where the direction you want your story to go, and maybe know the motivations of your NPCs or your creatures, then there is no wrong choice. And you can find another way to bring in that plot hook later. Or, maybe it'll be even better because they did the wrong thing. Because that's, like Julian said, that's how life goes. Also, Julian, there's a comment from Malachi in the chat. I think he's
hello, fellow Horizon Walker.
I think he's disagreeing with you because he says in all caps, 7 HP from a TPK, Julian.
That's a failure, isn't it?
If it's meant to be a TPK, it's meant to be a TPK.
Yeah. And that's another thing is when sometimes when somebody does the wrong thing, it's going to lead to a player character's death. In my home game, I had one of my teammates wanted to try to move into a position to protect somebody, but as soon as he ended his turn, looked around the map and realized he put himself in the direct shot of all the bad guys.
Yeah.
And he ended up dying, and that character passed away, and it ended up obviously taking our story into a whole new direction. But at the end, it was such an incredible moment, and there was a lot of character growth that happened from it. So, you just can't be afraid of killing your players.
So question for both of you, because I'm curious how your minds work. When you're looking at the module, do you prefer and do you look at the end and work your way back, or do you look at the beginning and work your way forward?
I don't know, Johnny, what do you think?
To be fair, I think this is actually why we work so well together. It's like a game of Jenga, because I think we actually do a little bit of both. When we're putting the modules together, we have a bit of a Trello board we use to plan it all out. But I think the way we come at it is we put ideas in, we work with it, and then we kind of divide it up to work. Probably a little bit of everything. We kind of put it in, we know where we want to get to, but then we just do bits that are cool, and it all then just slots into place.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of settle on a theme fairly early on, because that'll help define what kind of monsters you choose. Like, do I want to use creepy plant creatures? Do I want to use zombies and skeletons? Do I want to use monstrosities? And that can make something feel really fleshed out, is when you have a really good theme and you don't bring in other things. Even if there's something that might be a cool creature to use in this encounter, if it doesn't fit the theme, it might end up just detracting from it. And for me, I do think focusing on where to go is the most important part. And sometimes that means you write the middle first and then figure out where it starts.
Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's in media res. That's the right term. Not Deus Ex Machina.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know what either of those things are. It is, honestly.
In media res is like starting in the middle of something, sort of thing.
I'm going to be massively controversial here. You just look at the latest Star Wars trilogy. They weren't written as a trilogy. They were written as 3 individual films.
No, and that's a brilliant example of how not having an end goal aligned and in sight can really botch a whole narrative. And
also a tone.
Yeah, that is a brilliant example, good sir, of how you need to have a theme and a goal and an end plot and an end moment in mind. That's
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
just waiting for the chat to explode now with like different sides of the argument. But yeah, it's just having that kind of coherent, just some kind of structure again. I mean, yeah, we mentioned it earlier on, but just the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's like most writers will put a story together. Is just as long as you've got some kind of thread moving through the three parts, you'll be fine. It's just as long as you know it's going to hang together. But
yeah. The reason I asked is just because I've always struggled with the forward thinking. I have a very hard time coming up with like an initial setting, or an initial conflict, or an initial issue, problem, quest, and then working towards an end goal. I've never understood how people's minds work when they're creating that story that way. Oh, there it goes. I think we're back up. I don't know what happened.
That was weird. Hello.
That's very strange.
I blame Strahd.
I blame Strahd. When in doubt, blame Strahd.
That old wolves chewing through the cables. It's fine.
No, pretty sure it was on our end here.
Sorry about that, guys. Well, honestly, we're kind of right at the end of the hour anyway.
We are.
Is there anything else that you guys would like to ask each other or us or anything from the audience, from my guests?
What's your favorite module that you've that we put out so far?
My favorite module hasn't come out yet.
Come on, Jason.
That one's my favorite, but I actually really liked the Blighted module. I really think it's cool what we did with Yesterhill, because one thing that's really fun about the Curse of Strahd module is it does have a lot of things that are really, really fleshed out. It's got some amazing NPCs, some really interesting, unique locations, some cool items, but it also has a lot of things that aren't very fleshed out and aren't very specific on, where you could go from there. And so I've been having a lot of fun creating things that people can add to their home game at home and just making Curse of Strahd an even bigger, more interesting module. So it can end up being like a campaign, because there's so much to build from there.
And actually, I've just seen a question in chat from Father Dragion. This actually leads into a point I was about to raise quite also. It segued in nicely in saying about, do we use any books as references? So
all the time.
Yeah,
all the time. Reference all the things.
Everything. Come on. But no, especially with the Yesterhill one we did, and it's actually, when this next module drops, please, yay, it's an interesting contrast, because when we did Yesterhill, we did work from the Curse of Strahd book. We had a bit more structure that we had to follow the narrative that was set. There was the Gulthius tree, there was the Berserkers, there was kind of a setting in place that we needed to actually follow. Now, so without giving too many spoilers away, you might be seeing some more of that again, but this time, rather than Hillary and myself actually having to follow a more set narrative, we followed Jay's overall narrative, and what you will see coming out should be quite exciting, because it's very similar, but it's now Hillary and I really getting our claws into it. And we're hoping you're going to like it, but it is based on the books a bit still, especially with the Van Richten stuff, because it gave us a whole load of new material to work with. But literally, I mean, Hillary and I mean, we think that Jules is evil when he kills people off in chat. I mean, Hillary and myself putting this module together, I mean, we were literally rubbing our hands together in glee.
So true.
You guys are gonna like it. It's a very fun module, and it should be coming out, if not tonight, early tomorrow morning. We're just kind of getting the final touches on it. Jay's making it, as Jay do.
Beautiful.
I had a question I was gonna ask. Oh no, it was a comment. Kind of along that line of do we use do we pull from books to reference? And maybe you weren't here for earlier on. Was Father Dragion? But we were saying how a lot of times what we'll do is we'll actually pull from the lore of monsters. So going into the monster manual, looking not just at their stat block, but what is the monster about? What is that flavor text above or below that really gets into the motivations, the environments, the history and the lore behind all of these different monsters? Because a lot of that will lend to how you run them and bring a lot of different insights into what you can do with them. Beyond just being a monster to throw at your party. A lot of what we have done and a lot of the things that we've pulled into our narrative use that sort of mentality.
Yeah, and I mean, Hillary touched on earlier on. I mean, it was a great point to make. Is obviously it's the theme of the creatures as well. So again, by reading through the background and the type of creatures you've got, is just search through the monster manual, do the search for the creatures, get a theme in mind, and then search for, again, have in mind what kind of like the threat level of the adventure is. So again, you can use the D&D encounter builder, know your players. So it could be, we're working with 5 people at level 5 as an average. Okay, so that's going to kind of dictate your CR levels. And then from that, you kind of limit your choice a little bit. So, okay, so we're looking for undead creatures or planty type creatures in that threat range. And that, then you'll start looking at stuff. And again, the number of times that Hilary and I just went, oh, have you read this one?
Oh.
Have you seen what this one does?
Yeah.
Van
They
Richten's
kind of
is
go-
also very good for that because there's a lot of really cool stuff on Van Richten's. So much cool stuff.
Yeah.
I
And
am
actually,
so
one thing I
pumped for
wanted
the
to
Treasury of
mention-
Dragons or whatever it's called.
Yes, that's going to be cool. But one thing I wanted to mention about Van Richten's, kind of going back to one of our very first questions from, I think it was Matt Machinsky, asked about like how to make your, like how to play your creatures more like tougher, is in Van Richten's, it actually outlines like if you want to play him tougher, add this ability from this creature, or add this ability from this creature. And like mixing and matching abilities from creatures is one of the most fun ways to beef something up. Like gifts, if you have a bunch of beasts that you want to use, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but let's go with T-Rexes. T-Rexes are super cool, but then if you give T-Rexes pack tactics and make them smarter for some reason,
T-Rexes that act as velociraptors? Ooh.
that would be terrifying, right?
Ooh.
And you can totally change the theme of a creature by giving it a different kind of ability like that. And just go off of what's already created. Like Julian said earlier, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. WotC and the people at Dungeons and Dragons have put in so much work into creating amazing content for us to build off of. You just use it, utilize it. Honestly, we could not do what we do without using resource books.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
100%.
All right, last comment. Sorry, go ahead, Johnny.
Okay, so if it seems like a really totally evil, cruel, and nasty thing to do to the players, sign up and make 3 of them.
Yeah, do it.
Do it.
All right, last comment from the chat from Mr. Carrot. Thank you all for the work you 3 put in on the server. The modules are amazing, and letting us Weavers play with it is humbling. Thank you. I just want to say thank you for... Our Weavers are awesome. They have added so much value to what we do and so much immersion, and they make it interesting and raise the threat level. So thank you guys. Like really. Thank you for doing such a good job with what we've given you guys. I've always known, even before I found D&D, that I wanted to create something that other people could then take and build something else off of, as like a starting point, not as a finished product, but they could build off of it and be creative from what I created. And I think this just fills that so perfectly.
Yeah. And honestly, Mr. Carrot, I know that was directed at all 3 of us, but Hilary and Johnny are really the heroes behind these modules. They have put so much time and effort into these. The amount of love and the amount of care that goes into it, and the amount of back and forth that they go through, and carefully taking in all of our considerations and our edits, listening to me or Jason change our minds 17 times. Like they take all of it on the chin, and they output literal gold every single time. To my left and to my right, those are the heroes here. So please give them the thanks that they are owed. But then also thank you to our realm, our Weavers. It's all for naught if you're not there to run them, and if you're not there to be the DMs and to bring it to life. So this whole thing has always been about community. It's always been about bringing people together to enjoy and share in the love of D&D that we all have, and it means nothing if you're not there. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for being there for us, for supporting this community, both behind the screen and in front of the screen. It all lends towards and builds towards an amazing community that we all know that we have here. So here's to the happiest little corner of the internet.
Yeah, I love this little corner of the internet.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
All right. Well, as you guys know, before I do my thank yous, I like to open the floor up to my guests to plug anything going on that they're excited about. So if there's anything you guys want to talk about, now's the time.
End of COVID? Maybe going to cons in the States and maybe getting to actually finally meet everybody here in person. Wouldn't that be great to sit at a bar and have a beer together? That's what I'm looking forward to. But personally, no, I got nothing going on other than just tune in Mondays nights, tune in Thursday nights, and whatever other nights RealmSmith is doing something in the Discord.
I have one thing to finish with, and it harks back to the Tail Weavers, is they've been given a bit of a challenge tonight. We were trying a new idea out, so expect some great stuff from them coming over the coming weeks, and if it works, we'll do more of it. But I have one thing for the cast and the chat and the players. Barovia hungers, and she will feed.
Your blood muzzle voice is so creepy. Actually, I don't even know if that's blood muzzle or something else, but that was creepy and I loved it. Alrighty. Well, then with that, of course, a huge thanks to our sponsor, Forged Gaming. Thank you for having faith in us. This takes resources and all that jazz. Thank you, of course, so much, John and Jillian, for being here tonight and imparting your knowledge and your experience and everything else you guys do. Thank you, of course, to the Smith Guardians. You guys are amazing, and I'm so proud and honored to be part of your team. Thank you to our Technomancers, our Realm Watchers, and our Tail Weavers for everything you guys do. And of course, last but not least, thank you to our viewers, each and every single one of you, every time, for showing up. We literally would be talking into a void if it wasn't for you guys. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Massive hug foo to all of you. You make
Massive hug foo. Alrighty. Well, with that, we'll call it a day. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday as we venture back into the mists. Bye!
Bye!
Bye.